Hello there. This is Seth Kahn, and welcome to Planet of the Associations.
Right. And I'm Mark Levy, by the way. And what Planet of the Associations is it's a vlog and podcast for association C-level officers. And it's all about creating the association of the future, not the far future, not the future that you can't tell if something's going to happen, right? You can't hold us responsible. No, it's the future where you can hold us responsible. It's X+3. It's from now to 3 years from now. How do you create that near future association? One that's going to have like top membership, do big things in the world and so forth. How are you going to do that? Did I get that right?
You did. And we wander far afield, but we're always pulling it back to center because you know that innovation happens at the periphery. Right. And speaking of the periphery, I'd like to talk a little bit about writing a book with a particular angle on it. But before I go there, I just want to say, Mark, I heard that you knocked it out of the park at the National Speakers Association's $1 Million Speaker Club. Now, these are the speakers who make $1 million a year or more speaking. And I know all of our listeners out there hire speakers regularly to come to their conferences and blow the minds of their audiences. They need to deliver that incredible value, which is exactly what you did. In fact, you delivered so much that they asked you to come back just a week later because they couldn't get enough of you. What on earth were you talking about?
Right. So thank you. Yes. What it was I spoke about was how to write the best book that you'll ever write. And so I'll tell you a couple of things that I said, but this is totally apropos to the world of the association, whether you want to write a book or this is just about marketing or ideation or so. So how to write the best book that you'll ever write. I had told them, I said, so I've been doing this work since 2001. And often businesses and thought leaders and people like that and speakers, they write books in order to amplify their career, to get out there in a big way, to sell books, to sell consulting engagements, to get ideas, to spread ideas. And that's great. But I've seen just as many people write the wrong book. I have seen them write a book that actually hurt their cause or hurt their company or hurt their career. And by the way, either it's because it didn't sell, or it may have sold beautifully, but what it did was it took the person who wrote it away from what it was that they should be doing, if that makes sense. Like, so it was a success. And because of that, the work that the book espoused that they start to get hired for was not the work they should have been doing. It was low quality work. It was low fee work. It was, and so it's super important to pick the right topic and the right way to approach the topic that you're writing about. So that was one of the first things that I discussed. But I also discussed all kinds of, because I coach people on how to write books. I talked about all kinds of methodologies that I've created to help people come up with the right ideas for books.
Let me just jump in here for a second.
Yeah,
and just
sure.
say, you say that you coach people on how to write books, but I don't know if our listeners really understand what that means. Mark has coached people to write some of the biggest business bestsellers that we've seen in this country in the last 20 years. I know personally some of the authors of these books who worked directly with Mark. So I want to toot your horn just a little bit because you just kind of skidded right through that sentence.
Right. Well, thank you for that.
Mark does more than just coach people on how to write books. He coaches people on how to write, home runs, bestsellers. So, okay, please go ahead.
I appreciate that. That's kind of you. So a few ideas that I created around helping people understand how to write the best book that they can possibly write. And again, this is for books, but this is also about marketing or getting ideas out there in general. So one thing that I have people do is I take the model. I'm old enough to know records really well, right? I was born in 1962. And so I remember sitting there in my living room listening to a record, but the whole time I'd be looking at the cover and I'd be reading the liner notes and I like in tremendous detail, the copyright, everything about it, because you had to do something while you were listening. And so I always remember that on the cellophane of the album, there would be a sticker that would say includes the hit single blah blah blah, or includes the hit singles blah blah blah. And that always made a big impact on me, because it would really get you to focus on those songs, as opposed to would frame up those songs as being more important than the other songs. And so I thought, when I was coaching people on writing books, I thought of using that record strategy with books. So I'll explain it. When an artist used to release an album, and again, this is pre, iTunes kind of thing. Now the model's changed a bit, but the old model's still apropos. It's still appropriate. So they used to release an album, and so you might buy the album for the artist. You might say, oh, the Beatles wrote that. I love the Beatles. I'll buy anything the Beatles put out. Or you might say, well, I like the Beatles, but I don't buy everything they put out. But this album, Abbey Road, I hear this album, Abbey Road, is great, so I'm buying it for the album, right? So some people buy it for the Beatles, other people buy it for the album, but then there's still other people who would be interested in the album and in the artist because of the singles. So on Abbey Road, the idea of Something and Come Together, which was a double A-sided single, and so forth. So people come to the artist's work through different means, through the album, through the singles. And it's the same thing in the world of books. So an example, years ago, there was Jim Collins. So some people said, oh, Jim Collins, I love that guy. That guy's from Stanford. He does a lot of business research. I like his thinking. He has this new book out, Good to Great. I'm going to buy that book because I love Jim Collins. But then other people would say, oh, I have a company or an organization. We're good, but I want to be great. So I don't really know this Jim Collins, but I'm going to buy that book because I like the promise of that book. But still, because of the way Jim framed up some of the concepts in the book, that book had what I would consider hit singles. There were ideas in that book that were framed up in such a way that people would talk about them independently of the book, and then they'd seek out the book or seek out Jim Collins to speak to them or coach them based on those quote unquote singles. So it was things like, there were ideas in that book like the hedgehog concept, or level 5 leader, or get the right people on the bus. And there were others too. I can't remember them. There was at least one or two others. But I remember being at conferences and people would talk about level 5 leader and blah, blah. Oh, where's the level 5 leader from? Oh, it's from this book, Good to Great. Oh, it's from this guy, Jim Collins. So now you'd go seek that work out. So again, when you're writing a book, yes, the idea of what the book's about is of tremendous importance in selling that book and getting people excited about the book, the overarching concept of the book. But you have a lot of ways to get into people's consciousness. They may love you, so that idea gets in their, or maybe if you're smart, you've created some singles in the book. I'll speak to some of my clients and I'll say, okay, what are the singles here? Like, what are the ideas independent of the main idea that we can get out there in the world through you speaking on podcasts, through you speaking in speeches, through you creating like beautiful PDFs about an individual idea and actually getting it out there to C-level leaders or so. Like, what are the singles here, right? So that's the way, to me, I think about that even when I think about people's marketing campaigns. It's like, what's the overarching idea here? But what are the singles in this campaign? What are the things that can be carried out there independent of the big idea? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. And I think this is such an apropos, metaphor for associations that are working to grow their membership in this day and age. I mean, everybody wants to belong to an organization that's a recognized thought leader. So you could just literally substitute the association for the person who's listening to your speech, right? If an association was going to write a book, there's got to be a general thrust. It's got to come from the association. It has to be consistent with the brand. Some people will buy the book just because the association put it out, others because the topic is apropos. But then there needs to be those hit singles. So for example, let's say that your association has an aggressive international expansion initiative. So, and let's say that you've just rebranded so that you're bringing in adjacent roles. You're bringing in, different professions that are adjacent to the one that has been your standard for so long. Well, some of your hit singles could be around the value of international expansion, what it does to, if you were going to start a chapter in Bolivia, if you were going to start a chapter in Burkina Faso, if you were going to start a chapter in China, like what would be the value of that? What would be the benefit of that? Targeting those specifics, but also providing a template for someone who might be in Kansas City who wants to start a chapter so that they get an idea. But then there's also that adjacent role expansion. So that could be another. That could be, the BHAG or the right. The whatever the Jim Collins metaphor is for it. It's like you want to be able to pull out and say, in this book, there were 5 concepts that each travel on their own. And then because we've published this book now, we know that those 5 concepts are going to be getting legs out in our environment, right?
Right. And often those concepts, you need to take the time to frame them up in a way that they can travel on their own. Jim Collins just does such a beautiful job on it. The idea of the BHAG, the idea of the hedgehog he names these things.
The flywheel.
So that the flywheel, so that people can talk about it without having to scramble around thinking, how do I tell the whole story of this concept? They right. can lead with what the idea is. Let me tell you about getting the right people on the bus. Let me tell you what that means.
So you could literally create a PDF that's just about getting the right people on the bus.
That's exactly right.
And it could circulate without good to great. It stands on its own, right?
Right. And so it's a single, people talk about it. They have they have a document about it. They can get excited about it. And not only will they get benefit of that idea, but it's like a sampler for the rest of it. So now they're more likely to seek out the book, the album, the artist, right? The association. So what it is that we're saying is, right, it's your association has the big idea that you're all about, but then there's also hit singles within it. And so those hit singles are, what are people drawn to? What do you think sexiest about the argument or about what the marketplace would be most interested? How can you frame those up in language that people take away and talk about even when you're not there? What were you going to say?
You remember Reprise Records, the subsidiary of Warner, right?
Absolutely.
They used to send out a sampler. I remember getting that when I was a little kid. I remember listening to The Loner by Neil Young. There was a Frank Zappa song on there. I think it was Watch Out Where the Huskies Go and Don't You Eat That Yellow Snow. It was,
right.
I mean, mega hits came out on those samplers, and it was like they were seeding the world for all of this, for all of these artists simultaneously. I used to love those samplers.
Right. Oh yeah, I love those too. Yeah.
So quick story, just tangent story here. I'll figure out how this relates after I tell it. My son and I used to go out on father-son trips every summer, and we go to Airbnbs, right? So one year we're outside of Detroit with our big dog, our big German Shepherd, and we've got this Airbnb, and we show up, and the woman who's it's a single woman, right? She's letting 2 guys and a big dog into her house. She comes out to greet us, and she's super friendly. I won't say her name because I want to protect her privacy. She'll probably listen to this. She came out, she was very, effusive and warm and friendly. The first thing she said to us is, "I'm a hugger, let's hug." And, my son and I were kind of taken aback because we just landed. We come in, she helps us get settled. She's giving us a quick tour of her house. It's a very humble abode. We're going from room to room. It's all on the single floor. And we walk by this little small room, and the door's cracked open. And as we walk by it, what we see are an entire wall of platinum records. Like the big frame, the glass frame. So the next morning, my son gets up, she's off at work. He runs to that room, and I say, no, you can't go in there. She hasn't invited us in there. He goes, well, but did you see what was in that room? And I said, yes, I did, but we got to wait till she comes home. So she comes home that afternoon, and I say, we couldn't help but notice as we walked past this room, these platinum records. And she said, oh, nobody wants to see that. We said, yeah, actually we do. And so it turns out she ran Reprise Records. She was the marketing rep for Warner Brothers on a national level. She was in Hollywood, and she was girlfriend of a famous rocker who I won't name because it'll give away too much. She had photographs of her backstage with Elton John, with Neil Young, with Foghat. I mean, the list was endless. She had all these backstage passes, and they were real platinum records that she had on her wall. So she goes into her closet and she's pulling out shoe cartons of all these old photographs and memorabilia, uncanceled tickets from concerts with The Who. I mean, it just was endless. It went on and on. and we became good friends with her. But there was this, this thing about the sampler. That's what connected it to me to Reprise Records. That was her baby. She's the one who made that happen. And now we've stayed in touch. So how does that relate to associations? Well, you never know what your big hits are going to be or how you're going to use them in the future. And one of the things that's helpful, just like she's got this wall of platinum records, is to have collateral that documents the best of. And that's something that an association could use to create the kind of book that we're talking about, a book that's got hits in it, hits that'll travel on their own.
Right. I love it. Right. It's the taking what you have and like, what's the utility of it?
Right.
Like what are all the different ways that it can be used?
Yes.
Because I find that people come up with these great ideas. They come up with they put in lots of time in the creation of something, but they don't often think about all the different ways that they can use it. So that's what it reminds me of what it is. And by the way, different, even like not even at a single point in time, even as you're saying later in time, the utility of things even later on,
Absolutely.
So I love that. You were going to say something?
Well, just that associations have all of this value and they have a really hard time communicating it to their members because the list is so long and they can just get into a broadcast mode, which is mind numbing. People tune out and they never really understand. So the marketing fails. And this idea of writing the best book you can possibly write, to me, really speaks to a way of packaging the value in a way that it can get legs and travel. Right.
And so related to this, very interestingly, this is another thing I talked to the $1 Million Club about. I once asked, so I wrote the book Accidental Genius, and the former publisher, he's since retired as publisher, but a genius, one of my favorite people I've ever met in my life, Steve Piersante. So Steve, I once asked Steve, why do books sell in bulk? And again, this is totally right in line with associations. I said, why would a CEO buy 50 or 500 or 5,000 copies of a specific book? And Steve instantly told me, he didn't even think about it. He said, there's two reasons why a CEO would buy a book in bulk. He said, they get the book, they look at the book, and they say, this author really understands us. This author is espousing that people do exactly what it is that we're doing. See, I was right in having us do what it is we're doing. I'm going to buy a copy for everyone in the organization to show them that we're on the right track and always have been, right? So it's, we're doing it right. He said the other way is the CEO gets the book, takes a look at it and says, this author has it exactly right. You see what it is they're saying that we should be doing? I said we should be doing that, but we're not. You guys have been giving me all kinds of pushback. You've been putting all kinds of stuff in the way. But this author, they know the truth of it. I'm going to buy a copy for everyone to show them that I've been right. And that's what it is that we should be doing. So it's really the idea. Steve didn't put it exactly this way, but it's really the idea of if you want to sell something in bulk, the person who's going to be buying it, in this case, C-level, but the model applies elsewhere. They're not buying it because they're wrong. They're buying it to show that they're right, that they want to share it with other people to show they're right. It's like, see, we're doing what we should be doing and we always have, we're right. Or we should have been doing this. This is what I've been saying we should do. And so, it's this idea. I was telling the people, look, you don't have to follow this. You can be contrarian. You can tell people that they're wrong. But I just asked someone who had a super knowledgeable background in this kind of thing. And it's essentially like the person wants a badge to show that they're right. So how can you show without corrupting your message or just placating people or so? How can you show them in some way, shape, or form that they're right and then ride your message along with them being right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. So what do you think the applicability to an association is with something like that?
Well, I think about the person who needs to be made right is the association member, right? They don't want to think that they've joined something just to show them that they're wrong.
Right.
And again, this is not about making things like you need to tell people the hard truths, but there's something from a higher level where they need to understand that at the core, joining with you was an affirmation of something within them.
So one of the things that speaks to for me, because I have clients in this situation, is that they have a membership that feel misunderstood by their organization. This would be perfect, right? A book that demonstrates the value of that member's profession so that they could give it to their boss. They could give it to their colleagues. They could say, look, I'm more than just a cog in the wheel. I'm more than just a peon. I'm actually adding not just value, but significant value, critical value to this organization. And of course, the association for that profession should be the place where that's validated. You just want it to have legs beyond the association to the influencers that matter in that person's life, that member's life.
Right. I love it.
Yeah.
What else? Something that I had talked about. Well, it's this idea of, and I don't know if I've talked about this on the program before. I like that we have a program. I said program, and I said program. Whose program? Oh, it's our program. It reminds me, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, I did stand-up comedy in New York City. I did it on stage, and the first time, and when I walked off, two different people came up to me and they said, "I loved your set." And I remember thinking, I have a set. It's like, I was so proud. So anyway, we have a program.
Yes.
Right. So I tell people who are thinking of writing a book or whatever it is they're doing that it's often hard to outthink the world, that the world is much bigger than you and more complex than you. And right. So if you can try to think something up, that's great. But if you keep on getting the same answers, you need to create some kind of new input. Otherwise, you're going to get the same answers over and over again. Like, let's work with input. So I often send people out who are trying to write a book. I often send them out on an experiment. And I'll give you an example of one. So one of my clients, who's a major keynoter and a huge best-selling author in his space, he wrote the biggest selling book in his space of anyone. And he had called me, and I said, "What's up?" He said, I wanna write a new book, and I want it to be unlike any other book that I've ever written before, because he had written a few books." And I said, "What do you want it to be on?" And he said, "I don't know. I don't want to just repeat what I've already done. I want to go somewhere new."
Which would be really hard if you'd written the book in your space, right?
Right, exactly.
And that's what you're known for now.
That's right. Oh, totally. And so I asked him, I said, I was trying to find clues. So I said, give me an example, like what's something that's excited you lately? And so my client had told me he's very big in the social media space. He was a pioneer in the social media space and is still a giant in it. And so he said to me, well, American Airlines, I actually visited their command center, their control center, where they're directing the planes or so. And their head of social media, it actually sits there, like in the command center. Their desk is there, and they're tweeting and doing things in real time. And he said, I never saw, because social media people are usually relegated and they have to be ultra vetted, every message they're putting out and so forth. He said, I never saw someone who was in the center of things and given the freedom to speak, like in the center of things. So he was there interviewing the person. He was very excited by it. And I said, oh, that's so cool. So we formally started our work again a couple of weeks later. And I said to him, oh, so tell me something that's been exciting you lately. Like, because I thought maybe you'd tell me something different. But he had forgotten he had told me that story about, being there in the center of things. And so I realized that it was important of him to learn about things by being in the center of things. So I said to him, okay, You want to come up with something brand new. You haven't been able to think your way into it. I know that you like to be really relevant. Like, have you ever been to Comic-Con, the comic book convention? And I may have said this story before. If I did, I apologize. But I'm saying it again. Have you ever been to Comic-Con? Right. Have you ever been to Comic-Con? He said, no, I've always wanted to. And there happens to be one near my house in 2 weeks, just coincidentally. And I said, great. I said, there's my dog. I want you to go to Comic-Con and I want you to interview 10 people there who you don't know. They could be celebrities. They could be people manning the booth. They could be people wearing cosplay outfits and so forth. They can just be people who bought a ticket to get in, whatever it is. Interview 10 people and find at least 5 things about marketing that you didn't know before you got there. Now, remember, this is a guy who's paid 6 figures by the top places in the world to tell them about marketing.
Right.
No. Find 5 things about marketing you didn't know when you got there. And when he came back the next week, we discussed it. Like, what were the interviews like? What did you learn? And from that, he came up with his latest book, which all stemmed from what he learned going there. And it became a Wall Street Journal bestseller. And that's what his brand's about now entirely, right? Wow. So that's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea. And I can't underline this enough, that if you keep on having the same input, you're gonna get the same answers over and over again. So sometimes the input can come from a thought experiment, that's fine, or from reading something, that's fine. I'm not against that, but I'm also a big believer in not being as calculated as that, and like just going out there and living and seeing what's happening. Maybe go out there with a directive. Like I said, tell me 5 things about marketing you didn't know about marketing. But like, so for instance, this past weekend, one of my clients came out and hung with me for a couple of days. And we drove around to Philadelphia, right? I'm in New Hope, Pennsylvania. So we went to all these bizarre places. We went to the Mutter Museum, which is the museum, right, of medicine and surgery for University of Pennsylvania. And it has all these strange exhibits of people cut in half and so forth. And, we didn't do this, but I could have gone there saying, from a point of view of differentiation, when you go today to the Mutter Museum, find 7 things about differentiation that stand out to you from going to this Mutter Museum, right? Or whatever it is, right? If you go out, you may have a problem. Let's say, I'm making this up on the fly. I just created something as we're talking. So you may have a problem, something you want to create for your organization. You may say, I'm taking this day trip today. I'm going to Great Adventure. I'm going to whatever. I want to find minimally 8 things that would help me see my problem in an interesting light, right? You could just give yourself that design parameter, and I promise you it would help.
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of field trips and the kind of arbitrary assignments that you just talked about. One of the things that I'll do is because I love to go out in nature, my camper and all that, I will do what I call an earth walk. And an earth walk is where I take a problem and I go into nature. And I'm looking for metaphors, I'm looking for patterns, I'm looking for ideas that will help me tackle my problem from a source that's non-human. It's bigger than human. It's the natural world. Sometimes it'll be the display of a plant, or the way a bird is doing a call or something that'll give me an insight. Also, when I was at the World Bank, we went on field trips all the time, and it was a huge accelerator. Remember that initiative I was on, knowledge management, went from $0 to $60 million a year in just 2 years. And the field trips, I am convinced, and at our next episode, which we're coming to the close of this one, I will tell you about the value of field trips and 2 particular field trips that really accelerated our change process.
Oh, exciting. So that's going to be the next episode of Planet of the Associations. I'm Mark Levy.
And I'm Seth Kahn, and we'll see you next time.